Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video ever on this channel, which will be a collection of really interesting ancient mysteries that I came across and thought I'd cover. Starting off, we have the mystery of Cambyses' lost army. The mystery begins with the Persian king Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus the Great. Cambyses is best known for his conquests in Egypt, where he overthrew the last pharaoh and declared himself the ruler of the land. Yet, it's this story of his ill-fated expedition to the Siwa oasis in 524 BC that remains a mystery. According to Herodotus, Cambyses, after securing his position as the ruler of Egypt, turned his attention to the Oracle of Amun at Siwa. The oracle's priests had refused to recognize his claim to the throne, which enraged the king. In retaliation, Cambyses sent a massive army of 50,000 men to march across the desert and destroy the temple of Zeus Amun. This was no small feat, as the army had to traverse the treacherous Great Sea of Sand, a vast and desolate desert that stretched across Egypt and into Libya. Herodotus recounts the journey in his histories, describing how the army departed from Thebes, with Cambyses himself leading a separate contingent towards Ethiopia. When he came in his march to Thebes, he parted about 50,000 men from his army, and charged them to enslave the Ammonians and burn the Oracle of Zeus. And he himself went on towards Ethiopia with the rest of his host. But before his army had accomplished the fifth part of their journey, they had come to an end of all there was in the way of provision, and after the food was gone, they ate the beasts of burden till there was none of these left as well. Now, had Cambyses, when he perceived this, changed his mind and led his army back again, he had been a wise man at least after his first fault, but as it was, he went ever forward, nothing recking. While his soldiers could get anything from the earth, they kept themselves alive by eating grass. But when they came to the sandy desert, a certain number of them did a terrible deed, taking by lot 1 man out of 10 and eating him. Herodotus, Book 3, Chapter 25. With food and water running out, the soldiers resorted to eating their animals and even at one point turning on each other. Yet, despite this grim situation, Cambyses presses forward, refusing to turn back, and ultimately, his army vanished without a trace. For centuries, the story was treated as little more than a legend, a cautionary tale of ambition gone wrong. Yet, the mystery has never truly gone away. In modern times, various explorers, archaeologists, and adventurers have set out to find evidence of the lost army, but to this day, no definitive answers have been found. Some researchers have suggested that the army might have been wiped out by a catastrophic sandstorm, as Herodotus described. The Great Sand Sea, which stretches across Egypt and into Libya, is notorious for its violent and unpredictable storms. It's not difficult to imagine a sandstorm with such ferocity that it could engulf an entire army, burying them in the shifting sands. However, others have questioned this theory, arguing that such a storm would have been unlikely to completely erase the presence of an army that size. Another possibility is that the army got lost in the desert, disoriented and unable to find its way to Siwa. The Persian soldiers, unfamiliar with the terrain, may have become hopelessly lost, with no way to navigate the endless dunes. The most interesting theory, however, is that the army was ambushed or destroyed by local rebels. After all, Cambyses was not well liked by the Egyptian population, and there were numerous factions within the country who would have had a vested interest in seeing him fail. Some historians have suggested that the lost army was the victim of a coordinated attack by Egyptian rebels, and that Darius the Great, Cambyses' successor, simply erased the memory of the defeat from history. The sandstorm, in this view, was a convenient cover-up for the real cause of the army's disappearance. Despite these theories, there remains no conclusive evidence to explain what happened to Cambyses' men. The lack of survivors or even artifacts from the army has only deepened the mystery, and generally just brought more questions than answers. Over the years, numerous expeditions have ventured into the desert in search of the lost army, but none have been able to provide solid evidence of its existence. Some, like the Hungarian adventurer Laszlo Almasi, even conducted searches in the 1930s, but these efforts were fruitless. More recent expeditions, including one led by American journalist Gary S. Chaffetz in the 1980s, also yielded no definitive discoveries. despite using advanced technologies like ground-penetrating radar and thermoluminescence dating, yet the search continues. In the early 2000s, two Italian archaeologists, Angelo and Alfredo Castiglione, claimed to have uncovered remains of the Lost Army near the Siwa Oasis. They reported finding human bones, weapons, and artifacts dating back to Cambyses' time. However, their findings were met with skepticism as they were presented in a documentary rather than a scientific journal, and doubts were raised about the authenticity of the objects that were discovered. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities dismissed their claims, and the search for the Lost Army remains inconclusive. Next up, Lost Inca Gold. The tale of the lost Yanganatese treasure begins with the capture of Inca Emperor Atahualpa in 1532 by Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro. Following a brutal civil war with his brother Huáscar, Atahualpa was imprisoned in Cajamarca. In a desperate attempt to secure his release, he struck a deal that would go down in infamy, promising Pizarro enough gold to fill an entire room and twice that amount in silver. General Rumiñahui, one of Atahualpa's most trusted commanders, was tasked with collecting this vast ransom, gathering gold and silver from across the Inca Empire. Despite the monumental ransom, Pizarro's suspicion of an Inca uprising led to Atahualpa's execution. Strangled and burned at the stake, his death signaled the beginning of the end for the Inca Empire. But later, upon learning of the emperor's demise, Rumiñahui allegedly ordered the treasure to be hidden deep within the Yanganatese mountains of present-day Ecuador. The treasure, believed to weigh over 750 tons, has never been recovered, with its exact location being a closely guarded secret that Rumiñahui took to his grave, despite torture at the hands of the Spaniards. The Yanganatese Range, a wild and inhospitable region, adds to the enduring mystery of the treasure, stretching across a rugged terrain of mist-covered peaks, frigid grasslands, and impenetrable swamps. The area remains largely uncharted, and the conditions are unforgiving. Relentless rain, razor-sharp arrow grass that can grow up to 6 meters tall, and treacherous mud make the Yanganatese a daunting destination even for seasoned explorers. It's little wonder that the treasure, if it exists, has eluded discovery for nearly 5 centuries. Roughly 50 years after the treasure was hidden, the legend resurfaced when Vicente de Valverde, the first bishop of South America, married the daughter of an indigenous chief of Latacunga. As a wedding gift, Valverde's father-in-law is said to have led him to a secret location in the Yanganatese, unveiling the fabled Inca fortune. Valverde reportedly amassed significant wealth overnight, further fueling rumors of the hidden treasure. On his deathbed, he bequeathed a cryptic guide known as the Derrotero de Valverde to the Spanish king. This guide, which contained ambiguous landmarks such as the Reclining Woman, became the blueprint for future expeditions. But despite numerous attempts, the Spanish crown's effort to locate the treasure proved futile. One early search party met a tragic end when a friar drowned in the swamps, reinforcing the idea that the treasure was cursed. The tale then fell into relative obscurity until English botanist Richard Spruce unearthed Valverde's account in a map drawn by Anastasio Guzman in 1850. Spruce, who initially traveled to Ecuador to study medicinal plants, risked his life documenting Amazonian flora and indigenous languages. His discoveries, published in the Journal of the Royal Geographical Society of London, reignited interest in the Yanganatese and its treasure. Spruce's work inspired treasure hunters like Barth Blake, who in the late 19th century claimed to have found the treasure. In letters sent to friends, Blake described seeing life-sized gold statues, exquisite emeralds, and countless pieces of Inca and pre-Inca craftsmanship. However, Blake vanished on his return journey, reportedly lost at sea. Some theorists suspect foul play, suggesting that Blake was murdered to protect the treasure's secrecy. After that, the allure of the treasure endured well into the 20th century, with countless adventurers risking their lives in the quest. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, British mountaineer Joe Brown and his team launched a series of expeditions into the Yanganatese. Accompanied by famed climber Hamish McInnes, Brown's group faced severe challenges, from bouts of dysentery to sunstroke. Their travelogue, Beyond the Ranges, details the arduous journey, with McInnes recalling how their lips cracked under the intense sun, and clothes were torn to shreds by the unforgiving terrain. Their initial attempt in 1979 was cut short by dangerous conditions, including dense thickets of arrow grass. A second expedition in 1980 brought reinforcements in the form of experienced climbers Mo Antoine and Martin Boysen. Yet, even with local guides and porters, progress was slow. The team became lost on several occasions, and their supply of machetes broke down, forcing them to rely on a single Nepalese combat knife to cut through the foliage. Their goal of locating Valverde's cave remained elusive, as thick landslides and massive boulder fields blocked potential paths. Their third expedition in 1981 yielded little more than tales of near misses and missteps. Brown and McInnes stumbled upon what they believed to be Inca mines, but without an archaeologist to verify the findings, they returned empty-handed. Though they survived their expeditions, others were less fortunate. In 1986, an expedition led by Davis Groover ended in tragedy when fog and exhaustion separated the group. While Groover's companions were rescued, he succumbed to hunger and exposure. It was then that British author Mark Honigsbaum, who embarked on his own expedition in the early 2000s, described his journey as an exploration not only of the physical landscape, but of a deeper psychological terrain. In his book, Valverde's Gold, Honigsbaum reflects, "The search for lost treasure is not just about riches, it's about chasing shadows of the past, about reaching for something larger than oneself, a dream, a legacy, a myth." Like many before him, Honigsbaum's quest was driven as much by curiosity as by the hope of tangible discovery. Honigsbaum's expedition came at a time when technology and historical research promised new insights. Armed with Valverde's cryptic account and maps from London's Kew National Archives, he teamed up with local guides and adventurers who claimed first-hand knowledge of the treasure's whereabouts. Yet, the Yanganates proved as unforgiving as ever. It was as if the mountains themselves conspired against us, Honigsbaum wrote, describing how landslides, torrential rains, and dense fog repeatedly thwarted their progress. Despite their best efforts, his team returned without a trace of the fabled treasure, leading Honigsbaum to conclude that it may have been submerged in a lake made inaccessible by centuries of seismic activity. While the Yanganates legend continues to captivate, its existence remains a matter of debate. Historian Tamara Estupiñán has been one of the most vocal critics of the treasure's veracity. She argues that the lack of archaeological evidence, coupled with the vague and often contradictory details in Valverde's guide, casts serious doubt on the treasure's reality. The Yanganates' story is one of colonial greed and misinterpretation, Estupiñán notes in her research. She points out that many landmarks mentioned in the Derrotero de Valverde, like the infamous reclining woman, have no definitive geographic counterpart, making the guide unreliable at best. Despite these criticisms, the treasure's hold on public imagination remains strong. Andres Fernandez Salvador, a local Ecuadorian who has spent over 70 years searching for the Yanganates' treasure, dismisses this skepticism. To doubt the treasure's existence is to ignore the persistence of the indigenous oral tradition and the evidence passed down through generations, he asserts. Fernandez Salvador's efforts, spanning 4 decades and countless expeditions, highlight the enduring power of this legend, even in the absence of concrete proof. In more recent years, advances in technology have sparked renewed interest in the Yanganates. From satellite imagery to ground-penetrating radar, modern tools have provided unprecedented ways to explore the terrain. Even today, new expeditions are being planned, fueled by advancements in archaeology and a growing fascination with uncovering historical truths. Whether the Yanganates' treasure lies hidden in an uncharted valley or exists only as a tale of colonial greed and betrayal, its story continues to inspire those who seek the extraordinary, proving that some mysteries are as enduring as the mountains that conceal them. Next up, where is Alexander the Great's tomb? Alexander, the legendary military leader who conquered much of the known world by the age of just 32, was buried in a tomb that would have reflected his immense power and status. However, the story of his final resting place is filled with twists, disagreements, and a complicated history. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his body was initially placed in a golden coffin crafted to fit his form. The decision on where he should be buried became a matter of great political interest. Though Alexander had expressed a wish to be buried in the temple of Zeus Ammon in the Siwa Oasis, this request was not honored. Instead, his body was intercepted by one of his generals, Ptolemy I Soter, in Syria. Ptolemy, a key figure in the early Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, decided to bring the body to Memphis, the city that was central to the administration of Egypt under Alexander's rule. It was in Memphis where the first burial took place, marking the beginning of a mysterious journey for Alexander's remains. The tomb, however, did not remain in Memphis for long. Around the late 4th or early 3rd century BCE, during the reign of Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, Alexander's body was transferred to Alexandria, the city that he had founded and named in his own honor. Here, the tomb was placed in a structure that became known as the Soma, which is Greek for body. This mausoleum, located within the Serapeum complex in Alexandria, quickly became a focal point of veneration, drawing numerous visitors, including emperors and kings who sought to pay their respects to the legendary conqueror. Roman emperors were among the most notable visitors to Alexander's tomb. Julius Caesar, who visited in 48 BCE, is said to have paid homage to Alexander's remains. Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, is also known to have taken gold from the tomb to finance her campaigns. Augustus, the first Roman emperor, visited the tomb after Cleopatra's death, reportedly placing flowers and a golden diadem upon Alexander's head as a mark of respect. Caligula, the Roman emperor notorious for his eccentricities, is said to have looted the tomb, removing Alexander's breastplate, an act that would have further tarnished the sanctity of the tomb. But by the time of the late 2nd century CE, the tomb of Alexander had been essentially looted and sealed up. In 199 AD, Emperor Septimius Severus ordered the tomb to be closed, most likely to prevent further desecration. A few years later, the Emperor Caracalla moved some of the treasures from the tomb, which included Alexander's tunic, ring, and belt. The tomb itself also seemed to have suffered a slow decline due to various natural disasters, including a tsunami in 356 AD that damaged parts of the city, as well as rising sea levels that may have caused the tomb, along with other parts of ancient Alexandria, to sink into the seabed. Despite these efforts to preserve or protect the tomb, though, by the 4th and 5th centuries, it was likely destroyed, or at least so obscured that no one could reliably pinpoint its location. The last mention of the tomb by a contemporary historian comes from John Chrysostom in 400 AD, who remarked that even the people of Alexandria no longer knew where it was. This marked the beginning of centuries of mystery surrounding the final resting place of one of history's most famous figures. Over the centuries, there have been numerous attempts to locate Alexander's tomb, but all have proven unsuccessful. The Egyptian Supreme Council for Antiquities has documented over 140 attempts to find the tomb. Many scholars place it in central Alexandria, near the intersection of ancient streets, mainly in the area where the Soma Mausoleum was located. However, even as modern technology and excavation methods have advanced, the tomb has remained elusive. In the 19th century, several theories about the tomb's location emerged. Some archaeologists, including Heinrich Kiepert and Ernst von Sieglin, believe that the tomb was situated in the center of ancient Alexandria. Others, such as Ambroise Skilitzi, claim to have found Alexander's tomb inside the Nabi Daniel Mosque in Alexandria, but this discovery was never confirmed through excavation. In 1888, Heinrich Schliemann, famed for his work on the ancient city of Troy, attempted to locate the tomb in the same mosque but was denied permission to excavate. Some scholars believe that the tomb of Alexander was either destroyed or repurposed by later civilizations. One of the more outlandish theories posits that Alexander's tomb was rebranded as the Tomb of St. Mark during the rise of Christianity. This theory suggests that, after the destruction of the pagan temples in Alexandria during the 4th century AD, Alexander's tomb was transformed into a Christian site to save it from further desecration. This theory gained traction in the 8th and 9th centuries when Venetian merchants reportedly removed remains from Alexandria and transported them to Venice, where they were enshrined in St. Mark's Basilica. This shift into religious focus from pagan to Christian would have allowed the tomb's legacy to survive, albeit under a different guise. Also, Dr. Andrew Chugg, an advocate of this theory, found a stone block with Macedonian symbols embedded in the foundation of St. Mark's Basilica, suggesting that the tomb's location in Alexandria may have been hidden right in plain sight. Another interesting theory emerged in 2014 when the discovery of a large tomb in Amphipolis, Greece, led some to speculate that this might have been the resting place of Alexander. The tomb, which dates back to 4th century BCE, shares several characteristics with Alexander's known burial practices, including the use of monumental structures and the presence of significant artwork. Some experts believe it could have been built for Alexander, but his remains were diverted to Alexandria by Ptolemy. Others argue that it was a memorial for Hephaestion, Alexander's close companion, who died shortly before Alexander himself. The most recent developments in the search for Alexander's tomb have come from the efforts of Greek archaeologist Calliope Limnios Papakosta. For over 15 years, Limnios Papakosta and her team have been excavating sites in Alexandria, particularly in the Shyalot Gardens, which are believed to occupy the ancient royal quarter of the city. During their excavations, the team uncovered a marble statue that appears to depict Alexander the Great, suggesting that they are getting close to the long-sought tomb. The statue, which is now displayed in the National Museum of Alexandria, is a remarkable likeness of the general, and has fueled speculation that the tomb may indeed be located in Alexandria. Yet, despite all these theories and discoveries, the location of Alexander's tomb remains unknown. The possibility that the tomb was lost to time, buried under centuries of urban development and natural disaster, all just adds to its mystery. Next up, where was the Garden of Eden? The search for the location of the Garden of Eden has been a topic of interest and debate for centuries. In the Bible, Eden is described as the paradise where the first humans, Adam and Eve, were placed by God. It's depicted as a place of beauty, harmony, and abundant life, where everything was perfect before humanity's fall from grace. The book of Genesis, particularly in the 2nd chapter, provides details that have led many to speculate on its location. The rivers mentioned in Genesis 2:10-14, which flow from Eden, have been central to these discussions. According to Genesis, a river flows out of Eden and divides into 4 separate rivers: Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates. The mention of these rivers has led many scholars to suggest that the garden was located somewhere in the region of the Middle East, mainly near the modern-day Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Genesis gives further details about the river's paths. The first river, Pishon, is said to flow through the land of Havilah, which is known for its gold. The second river, Gihon, is described as flowing through the land of Cush. The third river, the Tigris, referred to as Hiddekel in the Bible, flows east of Assyria, and the fourth river is the Euphrates. Over time, the identification of these rivers with specific modern rivers has been a key element in locating Eden. The common interpretation has been that the Garden of Eden was located somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which flow through the region of Mesopotamia, often referred to as the cradle of civilization. The Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped region encompassing parts of modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, has been another area of focus. Some believe that the Garden of Eden could have been situated near the junction where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, south of the mountains of Ararat, where Noah's Ark is said to have landed after the flood. However, the exact location remains uncertain. One of the issues that complicates the identification of Eden's location is the way that Genesis describes the rivers. Some translations suggest that one river divides into 4, while others describe 4 rivers merging into one. Also, ancient Hebrew is not always clear in its use of words, leading to different interpretations. Scholars like E.A. Spicer and K.A. Kitchen have suggested that the Genesis account may describe 4 rivers merging in Eden to form one, rather than one river splitting into multiple branches. This interpretation could explain why the rivers mentioned in Genesis don't align perfectly with the geography of the Middle East today. In addition to the ambiguity in the description of the rivers, the possibility of a catastrophic event such as the global flood described in Genesis complicates the search. If the surface of the Earth was drastically altered during the flood, the geography that existed at the time of Eden may no longer be recognizable. This raises the possibility that the original location of Eden was destroyed or dramatically changed by the flood. Some even argue that the rivers mentioned in Genesis, mainly the Tigris and Euphrates, may have been named after older pre-flood rivers in a post-flood world. This theory suggests that the names of these rivers could have been carried over from the time before the flood, when the geography of the world was different. But regardless, while there is no definitive answer, the search for Eden continues. Some suggest that the garden was located near the Persian Gulf, where the Tigris and Euphrates meet. Others believe that Eden might have been situated further north, near the sources of these rivers in the mountainous regions of Armenia or eastern Turkey. There are also alternative theories, such as the suggestion that the garden could have been located in the region of the Caspian Sea, or even in the area surrounding the Black Sea. Despite the uncertainty, the narrative of Eden holds a deep significance in religious traditions, particularly in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. In all three faiths, the Garden of Eden represents the ideal state of humanity before sin entered the world. The expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden marks the beginning of human suffering and the separation between humanity and God. This story has had a profound influence on religious thought and doctrine, especially regarding concepts of sin, redemption, and the promise of paradise regained. In Christian theology, the story of Eden is foundational to the doctrine of original sin, which teaches that all humans inherit the sinful nature of Adam and Eve. According to this view, humanity's fall from grace in Eden has affected all of creation, and the need for salvation is rooted in this event. Christianity teaches that the hope of returning to paradise is fulfilled through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, who offers the promise of eternal life to all who believe. In Judaism, the story of Eden emphasizes the importance of free will and personal responsibility. Unlike Christianity, which teaches that sin is inherited, Judaism holds that each person is responsible for their own actions. The story of Eden in Jewish thought underscores the idea that disobedience to God leads to consequences, but it also provides the opportunity for repentance and return to God. The Jewish view of Eden is more focused on the moral and ethical lessons that can be drawn from the story rather than the idea of original sin. In Islam, the story of Eden is similar in many respects to the biblical account, but there are differences in the way the fall of humanity is understood. Islam teaches that Adam and Eve were placed in the garden as part of a test, and their expulsion was not seen as the cause of original sin. Instead, it's viewed as a way for humanity to learn from their mistakes and to seek forgiveness from God. In Islamic tradition, the story of Adam and Eve emphasizes the mercy of God and the opportunity for redemption. But yeah, whether it was in Mesopotamia, near the Tigris and Euphrates, or in another location entirely, the story of Eden still continues to capture imaginations and the hearts of those who seek to understand the origins of humanity's relationship with the divine. Next up, Atlantis of the Sands. The tale of the Atlantis of the Sands, also known as Ubar, remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the Arabian desert. Unlike the mythical Atlantis submerged beneath the ocean, the Atlantis of the Sands is said to have been lost to the vast expanses of desert, with its destruction attributed to divine wrath or a natural catastrophe. The story of Ubar has drawn explorers, historians, and archaeologists from all over the world, each hoping to uncover the remains of a city that, according to legend, was once prosperous and powerful before vanishing without a trace. The concept of Ubar, or the Atlantis of the Sands, is closely tied to ancient Arabian mythology and religious texts. One of the primary sources of the legend comes from the Quran, where the city is described as Iram, a place of great wealth and architectural grandeur. The Quran speaks of the people of Ad, who were punished by God for their arrogance and sinful ways. Iram, described as the city of lofty pillars, was said to have been destroyed by a powerful sandstorm, burying it beneath the shifting dunes. This divine retribution became a part of Islamic tradition, with the city's destruction symbolizing the consequences of hubris. And the tale of Iram is also found in the 1001 Nights, or Arabian Nights. In this version, the city is not only a symbol of divine punishment, but also a place of immense wealth and splendor, containing treasures beyond measure. The stories often depict Iram as a place with palaces adorned with gold, silver, and rubies, and its eventual fall into the sands is said to be the result of a divine wrath that struck swiftly and decisively. Despite these references, the exact location of Iram has remained elusive, leading to centuries of speculation about its true nature. Some believe it was a single city, while others argue that Iram was a region or an entire civilization. The debate continues, and the search for Iram or Ubar has been a major focus of explorers and archaeologists for over a century. The modern search for Ubar began in early 20th century, spurred by the writings of explorers like Bertram Thomas. In 1930, Thomas became the first European to cross the Rub al-Khali, also known as the Empty Quarter, a vast desert in the southern Arabian Peninsula. During his journey, Thomas was told by his Bedouin guides of a lost city that had once been a thriving center of trade and wealth, but was destroyed by divine retribution. According to these stories, the city's inhabitants had angered God with their corruption and were buried beneath a sandstorm. Thomas, intrigued by the tale, marked the location of a track said to lead to the lost city, but he was unable to follow it due to the challenges posed by the desert terrain. He did, however, bring the legend of Ubar to the attention of the West through his book Arabia Felix, which detailed his travels in the Arabian desert. This book would go on to inspire other explorers to search for the lost city. One such explorer was T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence, who had spent time in the Arabian Peninsula during the First World War, became fascinated by the idea of a lost city in the desert. He was told by his Bedouin informants about the ruins of a great city in the Webar region, and he believed that it might be the remains of the lost civilization of Ubar. Lawrence's own plans to search for the city were never fully realized, but his interest in the desert and its mysteries only added fuel to the growing interest surrounding Ubar. Another British explorer, Harry St. John Philby, also embarked on an expedition in search of Ubar in the 1930s. Philby, who was an advisor to the Saudi royal family, was told by his Bedouin guides of a place called Webar, where ancient castles once stood before being destroyed by divine fire. Philby's exploration of the area led him to discover what he believed to be the remnants of Webar, though modern research later determined that he had actually stumbled upon a meteorite impact crater, not a city. But the search for Ubar gained new momentum in the late 20th century, especially with the advancements in technology. In the 1970s, oil exploration teams in southern Oman came across a site known as Shisr, located in the Dhofar region. The site contained the remains of a ruined fort, which some researchers believed could be linked to the lost city of Ubar. The fort was situated along a network of ancient trade routes that were used by caravans transporting frankincense, a very important commodity in the region's trade with the Mediterranean world. Then, in 1992, an expedition led by archaeologist Nicholas Clapp, utilizing satellite imagery, claimed to have found the site of Ubar. Clapp and his team used satellite technology to detect ancient camel tracks hidden beneath the shifting sands. These tracks seemed to lead to Shisr, and the team hypothesized that the ruins at Shisr were remains of Ubar, or at least a city in the region associated with the lost civilization. Clapp's team uncovered the remains of a fortress, which they dated to over 2,000 years old, as well as a large limestone table that had collapsed into a massive sinkhole. This sinkhole, they suggested, was the result of a natural disaster that led to the city's demise. However, Clapp's findings were not universally accepted. Some researchers, including geologist H. Stuart Edgell, argued that the evidence at Shisr did not support the idea of a great city being buried beneath the sands. Edgell pointed out that the region around Shisr had long been a center of trade, and the ruins may simply be the remains of a small fortress or caravanserai, not the fabled city of Ubar. Other scholars, like Juris Zarins, who had worked on the Shisr excavation, suggested that the term Ubar did not refer to a specific city, but rather to a region or a group of people. Zarins pointed out that ancient texts, including Ptolemy's maps, referred to a region called Labaratai, which might have been the area where Ubar once existed. This interpretation challenged the notion of Ubar as a single city and suggested that the lost city was instead a broader cultural or geographical entity. Over the years, though, various locations have been suggested as the site of Ubar, with differing opinions on where it may have once stood. The Rub al-Khali, the vast desert known as the Empty Quarter, is one of the most frequently cited locations. This region, which stretches across much of Saudi Arabia and parts of Oman, Yemen, and the United Arab Emirates, is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Its shifting sands and harsh climate have made it nearly impossible to explore fully, but many believe that the ruins of Ubar could be buried somewhere beneath the dunes. Other locations, such as Wadi Rum in Jordan, have also been proposed as possible sites for Ubar. In Wadi Rum, an inscription near Jabal Ram Mountain references Iram, which some believe may be linked to the lost city of Ubar. However, like the Rub al-Khali, Wadi Rum has not provided conclusive evidence of Ubar's existence, and the search for the city continues to be complicated by the lack of solid archaeological evidence. The discovery of Eblite tablets in Syria, which date back over 4,000 years, has also fueled speculation about the location of Iram. The tablets do mention a city called Iram, leading some researchers to suggest that the lost city may be located in Syria rather than the Arabian Peninsula. This theory, however, has not gained widespread widespread support, and many continue to believe that Ubar, or Iram, is somewhere in the deserts of Arabia. Regardless of where Ubar might have been located, many researchers believe that the city's fall was due to a combination of natural disasters, economic decline, and shifts in trade routes. The region around Shisar, for example, was once a major center for the frankincense trade, but as the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, the demand for incense declined. Additionally, climatic changes and the drying up of water sources may have made the area less hospitable, leading to the decline of the trade routes and the eventual abandonment of the area. Overall, though, the search for Ubar, being called the Atlantis of the Sands, continues to fascinate explorers, archaeologists, and historians. Despite numerous expeditions and the use of advanced technologies, the exact location and nature of Ubar remain elusive. Next up, we have Sappho's Lost Poems. Sappho, the renowned ancient Greek poet from the island of Lesbos, has long been a figure surrounded by both admiration and mystery. While she's considered one of the greatest lyric poets of the ancient world, much of her life and work remain mysterious, and only fragments of her once voluminous poetry survive today. Her poetry, celebrated for its depth, emotional resonance, and lyricism, speaks to themes of love, desire, and human connection. Subjects that have made her work not only pivotal in the history of literature, but also interesting for those seeking to unravel the mysteries of her life. Sappho's poetic contributions were once considered monumental, with estimates suggesting she composed around 10,000 lines of verse. Yet, ironically, only around 650 lines of her poetry remain, and even those are often broken into fragments. Brief verses or incomplete stanzas preserved in the works of other ancient authors or through archaeological discoveries. The mystery of what was lost with her poetry is profound. Entire volumes of her work, which once existed in written form and were collected into books, have just disappeared. Scholars today are left with the prospect of what might have been, piecing together her literary remains from the scraps of papyri, pottery shards, and ancient manuscripts that have survived the ravages of time. Many of these fragments are no more than a few words, a line, or perhaps an incomplete stanza. The mystery behind the survival of such a small portion of her body of work, though, remains unresolved. How much of her poetry has been lost, and what, if anything, caused this literary destruction? While there have been claims that the church or other forces sought to destroy her work because of its homoerotic themes, the truth remains in uncertainty. What we do know is that her poetry was not handed down in an organized or comprehensive manner. No complete volumes of Sappho's poems exist, and it's only by digging through the scraps of history that modern scholars can attempt to reconstruct what was once a celebrated body of work. Beyond the fragments of her poetry, much about Sappho's life remains a mystery. She was born around 630 BCE on the island of Lesbos, a place that itself has become synonymous with the themes of love and passion between women, largely due to Sappho's works. She was considered a member of aristocracy, and her social status likely afforded her some degree of privilege, but the specifics of her life, including the names of her parents and her exact role in society, are hazy. Ancient sources also provide little clarity on her personal life. One of the most pervasive mysteries is her relationship with a man named Kirkilos of Andros, who is mentioned in some sources as her husband. However, there is no firm evidence that she was actually married to him, and much of this idea is based on later interpretations rather than her own words. Sappho is also often depicted as having had a daughter, Cleis. It's unclear whether Cleis was truly her daughter or if she was a lover, as the Greek word pais, used in Sappho's fragments, could refer to either a child or a youthful beloved. One of the most famous legends surrounding Sappho is also the story of her tragic death. According to a widely circulated account, Sappho leaped from the Leucadian cliffs and into the sea, driven by unrequited love for a ferryman named Phaon. However, this tale is shrouded in doubt. Some scholars believe that the story was fabricated much later, either as a way to explain her perceived tragic end or to make her seem more aligned with the ideals of romantic love. This legend may be a projection of the feelings that her poetry aroused in her admirers and later generations, rather than a true account of her demise. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the excavation of papyri from sites like Oxyrhynchus in Egypt led to the discovery of several new fragments of Sappho's work, but many of these texts are damaged, making complete reconstruction difficult. The most recent discoveries have occurred within the last 2 decades. In 2004, the Tithonius poem, a long-lost fragment of Sappho's poetry, was finally rediscovered. Then, in 2014, a cache of previously unknown poems surfaced in an anonymous British collection. These fragments, including the Brothers poem, have shed new light on Sappho's themes, suggesting that some of her poetry may have dealt with her family and personal relationships, rather than solely focusing on love and desire. Even though these new finds are significant, they still represent only a small portion of the lost body of Sappho's work. The mystery of what remains hidden is one that continues to interest scholars as they attempt to reconstruct the full extent of her poetic legacy. It's believed that many more fragments lie buried, awaiting discovery in the sands of time, but the sheer difficulty of deciphering ancient texts and the rarity of such discoveries mean that the complete recovery of Sappho's work remains unlikely. Something else that's interesting is the way her sexuality has been interpreted over time. In antiquity, Sappho was often portrayed as a promiscuous woman, a figure who expressed desire for both men and women. Ancient Athenian comedy, in particular, caricatured her as a heterosexual woman with an insatiable sexual appetite, a view that conflicted with the modern understanding of her as a lesbian poet. It wasn't until later centuries, particularly the 19th and 20th centuries, that Sappho's relationships with women began to be acknowledged as a defining feature of her poetry. The term lesbian, which originates from the name of her home island, has come to symbolize female homosexuality. And Sappho's work has been embraced as a celebration of love between women. Yet, despite the prominence of her sexuality in modern discourse, the true nature of Sappho's sexual identity remains open to interpretation. Questions like, did she truly have romantic and sexual relationships with women, or did her poetry simply reflect a broader exploration of love and desire? But yeah, overall, the mystery of Sappho is not just about what is lost, but also about what her life and work reveal about the ancient world. Her poetry, with its emotional power and its exploration of love, longing, and human connection, continues to resonate with readers today. Next up, Plague of Athens. The Plague of Athens, which struck the city in 430 BCE during the second year of the Peloponnesian War, remains one of the most devastating epidemics in recorded history. The plague killed a significant portion of the population, including not only civilians but also many of Athens' most experienced soldiers and sailors. Its impact on the city-state was profound, reshaping its social structure, its economy. Its impact on the city-state was profound, reshaping its social structure, its economy, and its political landscape. This was a catastrophe that Athens could not easily recover from, and many historians believe it played a crucial role in the eventual defeat of Athens in the war against Sparta. The plague basically arrived in Athens at a time when the city was already under immense strain due to the ongoing war. The Peloponnesian War, fought between the Athenian Empire and the Peloponnesian League led by Sparta, had been raging for nearly 2 years. The Athenians, under the leadership of Pericles, had adopted a defensive strategy. They withdrew behind the city's walls, relying on their naval superiority to supply the city and harass the enemies, while avoiding direct confrontation on land with Spartans. This strategy, however, meant that the population inside the walls grew rapidly as refugees flooded into Athens from the surrounding countryside. This overcrowding, combined with the poor sanitary conditions typical of ancient cities, created a perfect environment for the spread of disease. Thucydides, the Athenian historian who survived the plague himself, offers the most detailed contemporary account of the epidemic in his History of the Peloponnesian War. He describes the plague as originating in Ethiopia, passing through Egypt and Libya, and eventually reaching Greece. The disease spread quickly and was first noted in the port of Piraeus, Athens' main source of food and supplies. Thucydides' description of the plague's symptoms is graphic and horrifying. He writes, violent heats in the head, redness and inflammation of the eyes, throat and tongue quickly suffused with blood. Breath became unnatural and fetid, sneezing and hoarseness, violent cough, vomiting, retching, violent convulsions, the body externally not so hot to the touch, nor yet pale, a livid color inkling to red, breaking out in pustules and ulcers. The illness affected the body in stages, starting with intense fever and inflammation, followed by severe vomiting, diarrhea, and convulsions. The disease was so brutal that it often killed victims within 7 to 9 days of the first symptoms, and those who survived were left with permanent scars, including loss of eyesight, memory, and even fingers or toes. Thucydides, despite lacking medical training, did his best to record the symptoms and progress of the plague, providing valuable insights into the disease's impact. His account is particularly important because, as a survivor, he offers a first-hand perspective on the illness's devastating effects, not only on the physical body but also on the social and psychological part of Athens. Many of those who were struck by the plague developed severe psychological symptoms, including anxiety, hopelessness, and apathy as they realized the fragility of life. Thucydides observed that the catastrophe was so overwhelming that men, not knowing what would happen next to them, became indifferent to every rule of religion or law. The sense of impending doom led to a breakdown in social norms, with people abandoning traditional religious practices and social behaviors. The fear of death was so pervasive that even the sick were often abandoned by their loved ones, and the dead were left unburied or hastily disposed of in mass graves. The social consequences of the plague were as profound as the physical ones. Thucydides describes how the moral fabric of society unraveled during the epidemic, with so many people dying and the future uncertain. Athenians began to disregard the laws and customs that had once governed their lives. People ceased fearing the law since they felt they were already living under a death sentence. Likewise, people started spending money indiscriminately. Many felt they would not live long enough to enjoy the fruits of wise investment, while some of the poor unexpectedly became wealthy by inheriting the property of their relatives. This breakdown in social order exacerbated the difficulties Athens was facing during the war, as trust in the state and its institutions eroded. The death toll was staggering. It's estimated that between 75,000 and 100,000 people died from the plague, representing roughly 25% of Athens' population at the time. Thucydides noted that the disease was so severe that even the physicians who had the most contact with the sick became the first to die. This suggests that the disease was highly contagious and spread rapidly through the population. The sudden loss of so many citizens, especially experienced soldiers and sailors, had a long-lasting effect on Athens' military and naval capabilities. Thucydides remarks that Athens did not recover sufficiently enough to mount a major offensive until the year 415 BCE, after the disastrous Sicilian expedition. Theories about the disease's origins and identity have varied greatly over the centuries. Thucydides was unable to definitively identify the disease, but his detailed descriptions have allowed modern scholars to suggest various possibilities. Among the most frequently proposed candidates are typhus, smallpox, and bubonic plague. The theory that the disease was typhus is supported by Dr. David Durack, who pointed out that the symptoms described by Thucydides, fever, gangrene of the extremities, and a rapid progression to death, which is caused by the bacterium Rickettsia provozikii. Typhus is often associated with crowded conditions, such as those found in Athens during the plague, and it can be transmitted by lice. Thucydides' account of the disease's rapid spread among the Athenian population and the fact that it was so deadly to caregivers further supports this theory. However, other scholars have suggested that the plague could have been caused by smallpox, based on Thucydides' descriptions of pustules and blindness, both of which are characteristic of the disease. Smallpox also has a high mortality rate and can spread rapidly in densely populated areas, which makes it a plausible candidate for the epidemic as well. The possibility of the disease being a form of bubonic plague has also been considered, but many aspects of the description, such as the lack of telltale buboes and the absence of rats, make this less likely. In recent years, genetic studies have provided further insights into the nature of the plague. In 2005, a team of scientists led by Dr. Manolis Papagrigorakis from the University of Athens analyzed DNA recovered from teeth found in a massive grave believed to be associated with the plague. Their findings suggested that the plague may have been caused by Salmonella enterica, the bacterium responsible for typhoid fever. However, this conclusion has been contested by other researchers who argue that the methodology used in the study was flawed, and that the bacteria detected in the samples may not have been the cause of the epidemic. The passage of time, the degradation of pathogens, and the lack of complete records make it difficult to definitively identify the illness. Despite these challenges, the plague of Athens remains a crucial event in the history of ancient Greece, not only because of its immediate effects on the city, but also because of its long-term consequences for Athenian society. The plague, combined with the prolonged strain of the Peloponnesian War, weakened Athens politically and militarily. The loss of so many citizens, especially those of the warrior class, left the city vulnerable. Thucydides himself speculated that the plague may have been a factor in the eventual downfall of Athens, as it sapped the city's strength and morale. The war continued for many years after the plague, but Athens never fully recovered its former power. The social and political upheaval caused by the plague, along with the military losses sustained during the war, ultimately led to Athens' defeat by Sparta in 404 BCE. Next up, Zannanza Affair. At the heart of the Zannanza Affair lies a desperate plea from the widowed Egyptian queen Ankhesunamun, whose life was about to take a dramatic and unfortunate turn after the death of her young husband, King Tutankhamun. When Tutankhamun passed away unexpectedly in 1323 BCE, Egypt was thrust into a political vacuum. The king left no heir, leaving the royal family and the Egyptian court in turmoil. The young widow, Ankhesunamun, who was in her late teens, found herself with limited options. As the daughter of the famous Akhenaten and Nefertiti, she proposed royal blood, but her position as queen was precarious. With no son to inherit the throne, Ankhesunamun was faced with the challenge of ensuring the continuity of Egypt's royal line. In a move that stunned the ancient world, she sent a letter to Suppiluliuma I, the king of the powerful Hittite Empire, requesting one of his sons to marry her and become the king of Egypt. Her letter read, "My husband has died, a son I have not. They say about you that you have many sons. You might give me one of your sons to become my husband. I would not wish to take one of my subjects as a husband, I am afraid." This request was unprecedented in Egyptian history. Marriages between royal families were a common tool of diplomacy, but they usually involved Egyptian princesses being married off to foreign kings, not really the other way around. Moreover, Ankhesunamun's offer carried far more weight, because it included the proposition that the Hittite prince would become the king of Egypt. This was a moment of desperation for Ankhesunamun, as she saw a way to preserve her power and ensure her country's stability. Suppiluliuma, upon receiving the unexpected proposal, was initially skeptical and cautious, understandably. The Hittites and Egyptians were far from allies. In fact, they were often at odds, especially over control of territories in the Levant and Syria. Suppiluliuma found Ankhesunamun's offer to be strange and perhaps even a trap. As he later recounted, "Such a thing has never happened to me in my whole life." He sent an envoy to Egypt to investigate the matter and verify the legitimacy of Ankhesunamun's claims. The envoys returned to Suppiluliuma with a second letter from Ankhesunamun, and she seemed to have convinced the Hittite king of her sincerity. She wrote, "I have written to no other country, only to thee have I written. They say thy sons are many, so give me one son of thine. To me he will be a husband, but to Egypt he will be a king." Despite his suspicions, Suppiluliuma finally agreed to send one of his sons to Egypt. The son chosen for this mission was Zannanza, the second youngest of Suppiluliuma's sons. Zannanza's mission was not only a diplomatic gesture, but also a potential move to bring Egypt under the influence of the Hittite Empire. This would have marked a significant shift in the balance of power in the ancient Near East, as Egypt, once a powerful empire in its own right, could have become part of the Hittite sphere of influence. However, the mission ended in disaster. Zannanza never reached Egypt, and instead he was killed under mysterious circumstances, possibly before even crossing into Egyptian territory. The details of his death remain unclear, but the circumstances surrounding it were enough to set off a diplomatic crisis between the two empires. The Hittites, led by Suppiluliuma, were outraged and accused the Egyptians of murder. The people of Egypt killed Zannanza and brought word. Zannanza died. Suppiluliuma's response was one of anguish and anger. "O gods, I did no evil, yet the people of Egypt did this to me." The Egyptians, however, denied any involvement in the death of Zannanza. The new pharaoh of Egypt, a prominent court official who had seized the throne after Tutankhamun's death, insisted that the death of Zannanza was not a result of Egyptian actions. He wrote to Suppiluliuma denying any involvement, but the Hittite king remained unconvinced. The diplomatic exchange between the two rulers grew more heated, and the Hittites retaliated by attacking Egyptian territories in Syria. In the midst of these hostilities, a strange twist of fate befell the Hittite Empire. The prisoners captured by the Hittites during their raids in Syria brought back with them a deadly plague, which spread rapidly rapidly throughout the Hittite capital of Hattusa. Both Suppiluliuma and his son, Arnuwanda II, died from the plague, which was seen as divine retribution for the conflict with Egypt. This outbreak of disease decimated the Hittite population and weakened their power in the region. For Egypt, the death of Zannanza marked the end of any hope of a Hittite alliance through marriage. The Egyptians had to deal with their own internal struggles. The new pharaoh, was an elderly man and he needed to legitimize his claim to the throne. To do so, he married Ankhesenamun, Tutankhamun's widow. This marriage was seen as politically necessary, but it may have been a difficult pill for Ankhesenamun to swallow, as she had previously vowed never to marry a servant. Who was likely older than Ankhesenamun, and not of royal blood, had been a powerful advisor during Tutankhamun's reign and had seized the throne after the young pharaoh's death. Some scholars speculate that was, in fact, Ankhesenamun's grandfather, which would have made their marriage even more controversial. The marriage between and Ankhesenamun did not bring peace, and soon after I's ascension, Hittite forces launched another retaliatory attack on Egyptian-controlled territories. However, by the time of I's death in 1323 BCE, Egypt had regained some stability, though the future of Ankhesenamun remained unclear. In the epic poem Odyssey, Homer, the author, describes a legendary voyage home for Greek hero Odysseus after the Trojan War, a journey fraught with hardship, gods, monsters, and unforgettable adventures. At the heart of this timeless story lies Ithaca, the island where Odysseus longs to return. For generations, scholars have debated whether the island Homer described is the modern Ithaca or whether it lies somewhere else entirely in the Ionian Sea, hiding in plain sight. Descriptions in the Odyssey of a rugged, mountainous landscape with a forest-covered peak called Neriton, surrounded by nearby islands, have led to the conclusion that the island must be situated somewhere in the Ionian region. But there's always been a significant gap between Homer's vivid narrative and the geography of modern-day Ithaca. As one ancient scholar, Strabo, noted, Homer's geographical descriptions are somewhat vague and conflicting, leading to centuries of misinterpretation. He quoted, "For the poet, Homer, does not express himself clearly concerning either Cephalonia or Ithaca, or the other nearby places, with the result that both commentators and historians disagree with one another." The issue was never just about finding a physical location for Odysseus's homeland, rather it was about reconciling the poetic and mythical descriptions found in Homer's epics with the real-world geography of the ancient Mediterranean. Over the centuries, scholars have proposed various locations for Ithaca, some of them quite far from the Ionian region. Yet, even as new theories emerged, the question remained, could the island of Ithaca, the modern island located in the Ionian Sea, truly be the island Homer envisioned? Or did Homer's Odyssey describe an island that existed only in myth, a place of wonder that no longer matched the geography of the Mediterranean? In recent decades, however, a provocative theory has emerged. The island of Homeric Ithaca may not be the island of Ithaca at all, but rather the Peliki Peninsula on the island of Kephallonia. This theory suggests that Homer's Ithaca, with its majestic mountain of Neriton and its unique geographical position, is not to be found on Ithaca, but on the larger island of Kephallonia, specifically in the area known as Peliki. This theory has been championed by researchers such as Makis Metaxas and Hedy Putman-Kramer, who have combined literary analysis, archaeological discoveries, and geological evidence to present a compelling new view of Homeric geography. The theory is based on a close reading of Homer's descriptions in the Odyssey and Iliad, particularly the passages where Odysseus describes his homeland. In these passages, he speaks of Ithaca as being clearly visible and offshore, the farthest out in the sea, with a rugged landscape and a mountain called Neriton. These descriptions don't seem to match the island of Ithaca, which is smaller and less rugged than Homer's Ithaca. However, the Peliki Peninsula on Kephallonia fits the bill perfectly. It's the largest part of the island, it has a high and imposing mountain, Mount Anos, and it lies further west than any other island in the Ionian Sea, making it offshore and farthest out, as Homer describes. One of the key pieces of evidence supporting this theory is the geological data suggesting that the Peliki Peninsula was once a separate island. In ancient times, a narrow channel separated Peliki from the rest of Kephallonia. Geological studies indicate that this channel was likely filled in by natural forces, such as earthquakes and landslides over the centuries. This aligns with Homer's description of Ithaca as an island that was offshore and separated from the mainland. In fact, ancient geographers like Strabo in his geography referred to the possibility of a narrow isthmus connecting parts of Kefalonia, suggesting that the island's landscape has changed over time. The theory also finds support in the archaeological record. Excavations on Kefalonia, particularly in the area around the Peliki Peninsula, have uncovered Mycenaean-era ruins that match the descriptions found in Homer's Odyssey. For example, the remains of a large Mycenaean settlement in the region, along with evidence of a palace complex, seem to confirm that the area was once a powerful center of the Mycenaean civilization. This further strengthens the argument that Peliki, not Ithaca, may have been the center of Odysseus's kingdom. In the book Homer's Ithaca, A New Approach, Metaxas and Kramer take a detailed look at this theory, weaving together Homeric texts, archaeological findings, and geological studies. In this comprehensive work, the authors argue that the Peliki Peninsula on Kefalonia fits the descriptions of Homeric Ithaca far better than the modern island of Ithaca. The book challenges the conventional view that Ithaca is Homer's Ithaca and presents a compelling case for why Kefalonia, particularly the Peliki Peninsula, should be considered the true location of Odysseus's homeland. Metaxas and Kramer's argument is built on a meticulous analysis of Homer's Odyssey. In particular, they focus on two key passages that describe Ithaca in detail. In Odyssey 9:19-28, Odysseus describes his homeland to King Alcinous of the Phaeacians, offering clues about the geography of his island. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, known for my wiles to all men, and my fame reaches the heavens. I dwell in clearly visible Ithaca, where there is a mountain, Neriton, covered with waving forests, majestic, and on either side of it lie many islands very close to each other. Dulichon, Same, and forested Zakynthos. Ithaca itself lies offshore, the farthest out in the boundless sea, towards the dusk, but the others lie apart towards the dawn and the sun. A rugged isle, but a fine nursery of young men. This passage provides us with several geographical markers that are crucial for identifying Homeric Ithaca. The mountain Neriton, the proximity of other islands like Dulichon, Same, and Zakynthos, and the island's position offshore and farthest out to sea. The modern island of Ithaca does not perfectly match these descriptions, but the Peliki Peninsula of Kefalonia does. In their analysis, Metaxas and Kramer show how the geography of Peliki fits Homer's description better than any other island in the Ionian Sea. Kefalonian's mountain, Mount Aenos, is the highest peak in the Ionian Islands, and it matches the description of Neriton as a majestic mountain covered with forests. Moreover, the Peliki Peninsula is situated farther west than any other island in the Ionian Sea, making it offshore and farthest out, as Homer described. The book also delves into the geological evidence supporting this theory. Geological studies have confirmed that the Peliki Peninsula was once an isolated island, connected to the rest of Kefalonia by a narrow isthmus. Over time, earthquakes and landslides have filled in the channel that once separated the two landmasses, making the peninsula part of the larger island. The geological change aligns with Homer's description of Ithaca as an island that was offshore and farthest out. The authors also present archaeological evidence from the region around Peliki that supports the theory of it being Homeric Ithaca. Excavations have uncovered Mycenaean settlements, including a palace complex that could very well be the ruins of Odysseus's palace. This discovery provides tangible evidence of the Mycenaean presence on Kefalonia and suggests that the area was once a powerful center of civilization. Throughout the book, Metaxas and Kramer use a combination of literary analysis, archaeology, and geology to present a convincing case for Kefalonia as the true location of Homeric Ithaca. As Metaxas and Kramer demonstrate in their book, the journey to uncover the true Ithaca is as much about exploring the past as it's about understanding the power of myth and the ways in which ancient poets use geography to tell their stories. So that concludes this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed, and let me know if you have any suggestions for future content or anything, and I'll see you guys in the next one.